And welcome to a special edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast, the trade deadline edition. Mike Reigns, it's Rob Reigns here. We're going to do a daily feature this week coming down to Thursday, 5 p.m. St. Louis time, trading deadline. And Mike, I know there'll be a lot of speculation, a lot of talk going on this week about what the Cardinals are going to do before that deadline.
There will be a lot. And I think the first thing we have to look at is there will be a lot of teams calling on players that probably may not get traded at all. You know, for example, Brendan Donovan, right? Every team is going to have interest in Brendan Donovan because of how well he's played. That doesn't mean the Cardinals are going to trade him or they're even actively listening because, you know, you got to take some of these rumors and kind of look at them a couple ways because the asking price is so high. But the main comment is every team is going to have interest in another player, right? Hey, I have interest in Shohei Ohtani, but it doesn't mean he's coming to the Cardinals.
Yeah, if the Pirates all of a sudden call up and say, hey, we'll give you Paul Skeens for Brendan Donovan, I think you have to listen, right?
For sure, right? So I think that's the thing is like there's going to be things that are out there. But the other most intriguing point of this entire trade deadline to me is that we've been told from the beginning that any move that affects the ball club in 2026 and beyond is going to be made by Chaim Bloom. Well, none of us have seen how Chaim Bloom works or operates. So what is this trade deadline going to look like? Is it him? Is it Mo? And what kind of, you know, what's his thought process on some of these players that we like? How does he evaluate them?
Correct. Yeah, we don't know. That's the biggest question mark in the whole process is we just don't know what his opinion is. We kind of know what Mo's opinion is. We kind of know what the rest of the Cardinals front office opinion is because we've seen it the last few years, and you see who plays and who doesn't play. But I think as far as you know what Chaim's position is just one of those unknowns that we're really not going to know until after he takes over. The other thing I'm intrigued by to see what happens to this deadline, and you and I talked about this before on our regular podcast, is I personally don't think that the Cardinals' performance in the last 4 games that are leading up to the trade deadline, 1 game on Sunday against the Padres and 3 against the Marlins, makes any difference as far as what you do at the trade deadline. I just don't see that winning all 4 or losing all 4 should really make a difference in what moves the Cardinals make.
And I would agree, right? Because I think there's certain players that when we trade them and the younger guy comes up to fill, I really don't think we're losing a lot. And in some cases, I think we're gaining a spot, right? Because like in the case of Eric Fedde and Michael McGreevy, now Fedde wasn't a trade, he was released, but you're going to get a better pitcher, in my opinion, in McGreevy than you were Fedde. So it kind of makes you a stronger ball club. That's not the case with everybody, but if you're able to trade Matz, Maton, Helsley, etc., and get a decent product back and a young prospect that's going to make a difference, you're probably in the right move to do that.
I still think the 3 most likely players to go from the Cardinals before Thursday's deadline are the 3 free agent relievers: Ryan Helsley, Phil Maton, and Steven Matz. There is talk of all of them. I think there are teams out there that have interest in all of them. What's the match going to be, and who's going to bite the bullet first? I think that's the interesting question. The other thing about this is I think Mo, and you kind of look at Mo's track record at trading deadline, he doesn't make a lot of moves days before that deadline. He comes up to the day before or the day of the deadline and kind of basically holds out for whatever the best offer he's going to get on those guys is going to be. And I think that's going to be the case here. I really, they might make a minor move between now and Wednesday, but with the when you get to about 24 hours ahead of the deadline, that's when I think the Cardinals will start making their moves.
If I had to guess, if I was a betting man, Steven Matz is probably the first one to move because he's probably the easiest because he's not really a closer. He's a good middle relief guy. He could be worked as a starter. And I think Maton and Helsley are the 2 that can both be closers. Maton has been a closer on a World Series team in the Rangers the Astros, and he may go back to the Astros. You never know. But I think those 2 guys hold the cards for everybody else because there's not a lot of closers like them out there.
The other 2 things to take into consideration are, one is what the return is going to be for these players. I think the general reaction I get from scouts that I've talked to around the league is that the Cardinals are looking for controllable pitching, number one. And I also think you can make a case that they need a right-handed hitting outfielder, and we've talked about that before. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that whatever the return is going to be, I suspect most Cardinal fans are kind of going to be underwhelmed by it, and for 2 reasons. One is that all 3 of those guys, if those are the 3 who are in fact traded, are free agents at the end of the year. So you're renting that player for 2 months. You don't know that you're going to be able to re-sign them to a long-term contract. Whereas like in Kelsley's case, for example, had they traded him last winter, team would have had a full control of him for a year. So I think the return would have been greater than it's going to be as a return. The other thing I will point out that I think you can watch for is I think the return in most cases is going to be for a player who is at the lower levels of a farm system, meaning he is not yet eligible or required to be on the Cardinals 40-man roster after the trade is made. When the Cardinals have to set that 40-man roster this winter, they've got a lot of players within their own farm system that are going to have to be protected this year or expose them to the Rule 5 draft. And I think they don't want to have more mess on their hands with the roster configuration when they get into this winter. So I think if they're going to probably be looking for more players who are under team control, but also are still young enough that they don't have to be on that 40-man roster, which means in most cases, a lot of the fans are never going to have heard of whoever the player is the Cardinals are going to get.
And I agree with that, but I think the only way that I think the Cardinals would is when you start talking about some of these other guys like Brendan Donovan and Lars Newbar.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm talking about specifically those free agent rentals.
Correct. I was just going to say that, like, I think where you're going to, do the Cardinals want to trade Donovan, Newbar, Burleson, etc.? Probably not. But in the long run, if putting Newbar with Helsley gets you a 22-year-old, okay, I'm not saying they're going to do this, but I'm saying like Nick Kurtz, the first baseman from Oakland, who's on a tear as a rookie and is just a really good player, right? Would you trade Brendan Donovan to get somebody in a return back like that who's only 20 years old? Yes. I mean, that's the move that you make when you trade somebody like Donovan. You're not just going to dump him for Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham again.
3 teams I think you can look at that I think are going to be among the most active calling the Cardinals. Number 1 is the Phillies, who need some relief help. Number 2, it's the Dodgers, who are obviously in the market for relief help and probably some other things as well. And the 3rd is the Tigers. I think all those teams are potentially first-place teams, potentially World Series championship teams that are looking to bolster their club, and I think those are the kind of guys that could do that. I also wouldn't rule out the Giants or Kansas City in terms of possible deals here this week. So.
The other interesting thing is, like, we know some of the trades that Mo has made over the years, and he's got a great relationship with Cleveland, and you've seen him make a lot of trades there. But again, we don't know what Chaim is going to do. And a lot of people remember Chaim's time in Boston for trading Mookie Betts, and he got a lot of trouble and a lot of different thoughts about it. So is he not afraid to trade a player like that, or is he a little more hesitant right now? So it's going to be a very interesting trade deadline to see how he evaluates the talent that we currently have and the talent that's out there.
Of course, the thing to keep in mind about that deal is Chaim was ordered to trade Betts by Boston ownership. So it wasn't something that necessarily he wanted to do or chose to do. It was something he was told to do and basically ordered to do by management.
And to be fair, the DeWitts don't spend as much money as the ownership in Boston does. So now Chaim has to figure out, how do I work within that budget that Mo has experience?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. 5 p.m. Thursday is the deadline. We're going to try to update this little story every day between now and the deadline, and hopefully we'll have some trades in there to actually talk about. But we're going to not necessarily just deal in rumors, but just the kind of the reality of the situation and what we hear and what we know that is going on. So, Mike, thanks for the visit. Everybody enjoy the ball games, and we'll talk to you again soon here on STLSportsPage.com.